OMG. As the kids say, welcome to another tour. I'm gonna lower my mask because there's no one around, so chill out. Today we're doing a tour of Greenpoint, Brooklyn. This neighborhood is the best. I used to live here for 6 years, great place. I love this area. Got a lot of history, a lot of change going on here. Before we start, just want to remind you that my patrons and Patreon chose this video, so you have them to thank. You should check it out if you want to be on Patreon. I put other stuff there and all that. Also too, if you could like the video now, because you're going to like it anyway, that'd be great. And also too, please subscribe. That definitely helps trying to grow this thing, baby, see where it goes. All right, so today we're going to be walking through. Phil, how you doing?
Good.
It's good to have you here. How you feel?
Good, man.
I gotta stop asking questions just to get this thing started. Well, with that, I think we're gonna get through this neighborhood. Got a lot of little surprises here for you today. I don't know. Let's go. So we're walking. This is the East River behind me. You can see a really great view here from Transmitter Park. This is WNYC Transmitter Park. This was actually where the transmitter for WNYC was located from the 1930s up until 1990, and then it just sat abandoned. It was turned into a park in 2010. That's actually the transmitter building there. That's where the transmitter was actually located. Pretty cool, it's still there. A nice little view. This is really annoying walking on the snow, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, I can't stand walking on this. That's way better. So we're leaving Transmitter Park and we're walking down Greenpoint Ave, which kind of slices Greenpoint in half from north to south. It's kind of one of the main drags here. And it's called Greenpoint as a neighborhood because it actually had a green point of land jutting out into the East River before all the landfill expanded the coastline here. So they called it Greenpoint. Go figure. Kind of like Red Hook. Remember we talked about that in my Red Hook video? It's early for this, but sick plug. Yep. Now Greenpoint is the last neighborhood of Brooklyn to the north before you get into Queens. Brooklyn, by the way, is the most populated borough of New York City with over 2.5 million people. If it was its own city, it'd be the fourth largest city in the country. So that's a big deal. Greenpoint's also to the north of Williamsburg, Brooklyn. They're kind of like very similar neighborhoods in some regards. The only difference is that Greenpoint has always been kind of isolated because it doesn't have a subway going through it, only the G train, the infamous G train. You ask anyone in New York about the G train, they probably won't say anything nice about it. It basically just runs through Queens and Brooklyn, so it's never been as, cared for, if you want to put it that way, put it mildly. You can see there's lots of development here and lots of construction going on right now. That's a big part of what's happening in Greenpoint right now, and we'll talk about that as we go. But some famous people have come from Greenpoint. You have, for example, Pat Benatar was born here. You know who Pat Benatar is, Phil?
Yeah, I know.
What does she sing? You know what she sings?
She sings Love at the Battlefield, right?
Phil, nice work, dude. I'm actually impressed. Yeah, she sings Love is the Battlefield. She sings Hit Me With Your Best Shot. Hit me with your best shot. That one. Why don't you hit me with your best shot? That one. It's pretty good. So we're walking over here. Let me jump in front of you there, Phil. Over here to my right, you're going to see Polly G's. You see that? Polly G's is a very popular pizzeria here in the neighborhood. This was opened in 2010. Yes, way, Phil. So Polly G's was started by a guy named Paul Giannone, who was a pizza enthusiast. He actually would go to like 4 different places a day sometimes. He was obsessed with pizza. He built an oven in his backyard at pizza tastings. Pretty cool, actually. Now it's become super popular. They have locations in different cities. Also here to the left, you have the Eberhard Faber building. This used to be an actual pencil factory. So what happened was this guy named Caspar Faber was in Germany, in Stein, Germany. He was the father of the pencil, they call him. It's a weird nickname to get. And his grandson moved the company here to the United States in the 1850s. And in 1872, their factory in Manhattan burned down. So he opened this over here. You can even see the little pencils there up on the top there. It's kind of cool. It's one of the many buildings they had here in the neighborhood. It eventually left the neighborhood in the 1950s. So this neighborhood was heavily industrial at a certain point from the mid-1800s until like the mid-1900s. It was a heavily industrial neighborhood, just like Williamsburg actually, and a lot of Brooklyn. And so the Industrial Revolution kind of kicked off in the mid-1800s. Woo! Down the street over there, you see that red building, that Queen Anne style building. That's the Astral Apartments. The Astral Apartments was built by a man named Charles Pratt. Charles Pratt was actually the founder of the Astral Oil Works, which was one of the oil refineries here in the neighborhood that was actually bought by John D. Rockefeller. You guys know who he is? You know who he is, Phil?
Yeah.
He was, they say, the richest man to ever live, relatively speaking. He had apparently like around $360 billion worth of money when he died in relative dollars. But those were built by Charles Pratt for his employees, which is pretty cool and kind of like unprecedented. It was the first time that a person who owned a company just built housing for his employees because he thought if his employees were happier and had a good place to live and were taken care of, they would be better employees. Look at that, back when people had a heart. He was bought out by Rockefeller. But this neighborhood had lots of oil refineries, actually. It had a bunch at one point. So keep in mind, Greenpoint is also located to the south of Newtown Creek. Newtown Creek is located between Brooklyn and Queens. One of the most polluted waterways in New York City history. This place was terrible. There was a huge oil spill there that started in the 1950s there. And over the course of, over 20 years, they say it spilled like 3 times the amount of oil that was spilled during the Exxon Valdez disaster in the 1980s. So we're talking like, 30 million gallons of oil, about, they say, possibly that much, into the Newtown Creek and the surrounding areas. So it's kind of a mess. People were getting sick in the area. It's a whole thing. So this neighborhood started out, I'll go through the history now, a little specific history. This neighborhood started out with a guy named Dirk Volkertsen. He was a Norwegian dude who actually came here, and in the 1630s he first started exploring this area. He got married. He was actually living with his in-laws, but couldn't stand them. Go figure, some things never change, huh? The in-laws, am I right, Phil?
I get it.
But he moved out of his in-laws and he started looking for a place to live. He lived in Manhattan for a bit, but then he saw that all this land was pretty much untouched. So in late 1630s, he starts kind of, coming back and forth. There was a lot of Native Americans here at the time, though, so it was kind of dangerous. So not a lot of people would kind of venture here. In the 1640s, he settles here and he slowly starts to build it up. But throughout the 1600s, the 1700s, there wasn't too many people here. In fact, all the way up until the early 1800s, there was really about 5 families that controlled all this area with their land. One of the biggest families was the Meserole family. You're going to see a street here in the neighborhood named after them. And, and eventually what happened was a man named Isaiah Bliss, a very, I guess, astute visionary, married into the family. Yeah, it's very, very like, he married into the family. Oh, I don't know, who am I to judge? But using his new connections, he bought up a lot of the land there and started to develop it. He actually built a bridge down to Williamsburg, which was developing a little more quickly. And that bridge allowed more traffic to pass through. This is in the 1830s, by the way. And so this kind of slowly starts to grow Greenpoint. They start to build housing, etc. And it slowly starts to grow then. By the mid-1800s, you start getting immigration and the Industrial Revolution. So this begins Greenpoint's kind of slow building up, and it becomes industrial. You have lots of industry that's passed through Greenpoint. One of the bigger industries was shipbuilding. Shipbuilding was one of the first industries that was courted in this neighborhood, and one of the famous ships built here was the USS Monitor. The USS Monitor, you know what that is, Phil?
No.
The USS Monitor, named the Monitor because it monitored the blockade of the South by the North during the Civil War. It was built in 1862. It fought in the Battle of Hampton Road against the USS Merrimack, which was the southern ironclad ship. The Monitor was the first ironclad ship for the North, and it was a really big deal. Yeah, it was a big deal. It was built here in Greenpoint. So lately, a lot of people who used to live here have had to move because it's starting to get more expensive in the neighborhood. Why don't we pop down here to this little gift shop where one of my friends works and talk to him a little bit about that. So I'm here with Arif, who owns Farooks Gifts here on Manhattan Avenue. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for asking. So you're from the neighborhood originally?
Yes, my father came here about 30 years ago by himself, and then he brought us over, the whole family, from Bangladesh. And this was our first place we landed, and we never moved. And recently, about 2 years ago, we had to move to the Bronx.
The Bronx is pretty far away.
Oh, trust me, I do it every day.
So why did you guys have to leave?
It was because the place we were living at that time wasn't rent stabilized, and the rent went high. It got too expensive, and we just decided to move.
Do you wish you could stay here in Greenpoint?
Every day, because I have to come here to work every day, and it upsets me that after I close my shop, I can't go straight to my house. I got to take the train commute about another hour or so.
So you got a pretty great store here, Arif.
I hope you liked it, man.
I like it a lot. I actually like that right there. Can I try it on?
Go for it. Wow, that hat really looks good on you, dude.
Thanks. I know I look pretty sick. Yeah. Do you have anything else you'd like to say about the neighborhood?
We've been here for many years, and let's keep it going. Greenpoint is a place you should come check it out. You know, there's no other place like Greenpoint and Brooklyn.
All right. Well, that's the interview. Thanks a lot for hanging out. Back to the tour.
You gotta pay for that, man. Sick plug.
Well, that was pretty sick. Let's keep moving. So we're walking down Manhattan Ave now. You can see off in the distance here. This is kind of the main drag of Greenpoint. Now, I was saying that in the mid-1800s it started becoming industrial, but what you also had is a lot of immigration starting at the time, and originally it was Irish and German, then eventually Italians, and here in this neighborhood, Polish. The Polish people started coming in the late 1800s, and then there was another surge of Polish in the mid-1900s around the World War II time, as well as in the later, the 1990s as well. Another big contingent here is Puerto Rican and Latin American. They're more to the north of Greenpoint Ave. We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Here to the left, you have a pretty cool building. That's St. Anthony of Padua, Catholic church, St. Anthony of Padua. Saint, died in Italy. A Gothic revival church. We've talked about how in the mid-1800s there was a Gothic revival in New York. A lot of Gothic churches built. Grace Church, Trinity Church, the Brooklyn Bridge was built around that time. So this is also another Gothic building. Pretty cool, important church in the neighborhood. Let's keep walking. Sister Frances Cress, a very important figure in this church. She was a huge environmentalist. She actually pushed a lot for the cleanup of Newtown Creek. To get a little more perspective on Newtown Creek, why don't we go over there? Well, would you look at that? I'm actually on the Pulaski Bridge over the Newtown Creek. The Pulaski Bridge was actually built in the 1950s, and it connects Greenpoint to Long Island City, Queens. This is named after Casimir Pulaski, who was a Revolutionary War hero from Poland. Ah, look at that. He's actually credited with kind of developing the early American cavalry and saving George Washington's life. You know who that is, right? He's the guy on the $1 bill. No big deal, I know he's on the $1 bill. But below me is the Newtown Creek. The Newtown Creek is one of the most polluted waterways in the country. It's actually a Superfund site, which means that federal funds can be diverted to help clean this thing up. There was actually an oil leak here. Among the dozens of oil refineries that were here in the late 1800s, there's a big substantial leak starting in the 1950s all the way until the 1970s. They believe that up to 30 million gallons of oil was released into this water. Needless to say, all the fishies and all that stuff that was there, pretty dead, pretty gross. In fact, people were having irritation on their skin, coughing, children were agitated. It was a total mess. And it was people like Sister Frances Cress who helped to, bring awareness, clean it up, all that stuff. You gotta fight for what you believe in, baby. Come on, let that be a lesson. But pretty cool little bridge. The Kosciuszko Bridge is the other one that leads to East Greenpoint. And it's also named after a Polish Revolutionary War hero. Would you look at that? But yeah, here to the south of me is also North Greenpoint, which, by the way, it's all on a grid. When Neziah Bliss laid out all the streets, I guess, in the mid-1800s, they were originally lettered A, B, C, D, but the residents thought it was kind of boring and plain, so eventually they gave them names, but they go down, or they go up in letters as you go south. So it starts at Ash, then goes to Box, then Clay, etc., all the way until O, which is Oak. Ah, look at that. Isn't that neat? Isn't that neato? All right, now I think I'm done. Back to the tour, baby. I was saying how in the mid-1800s it starts to become more industrial, and what this caused was a lot of people who moved here when Neziah Bliss, mapped out the neighborhood. A lot of those upper class people who were trying to get away from the city started moving out and just left it really for the industry. Other big industry things that have happened here, the Brooklyn Bridge caissons, the boxes that sank to the bottom of the water that the bridge was built on top were manufactured here. You can learn more about that in my Brooklyn Bridge video. What's that? That's right. All right. I'm gonna raise my mask. There's a lot of people around here. But you can see these signs here. A lot of them are in Polish, because you still have a lot of Polish people. Now what's happened though is as the neighborhood's gotten more expensive, the Polish people have been pushed further inland because the waterfront is what's worth a lot of money. And so the Polish people are still here, not as much as before, but they've been pushed inward. That's actually where I used to live, further east. And there's a really cool area there, little parks and stuff. Maybe we can check it out. Well, look at that. I'm here in McGorry Park, which is to the east here of Greenpoint. I used to live right around the corner, so this used to be my playground. Oh. But you can see some cool stuff here. This church here is now an event space. They put on concerts, or at least they did, put on concerts and kind of shows there, which are really cool. Here you have a statue that's dedicated to the people who lost their lives during World War I, the Great War, they call it, or they used to call it. Here you have this cool pavilion that was built by Helmley of Helmley and Huberty, who designed the Greenpoint Savings Bank. This is Beaux-Arts, l'École des Beaux-Arts. We've talked about that style of architecture before, based on l'École des Beaux-Arts, l'École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, France, where a lot of the architects were studying at the time. You know, New York City adopted that style around the turn of the century because it was exploding, becoming important, you know, all that. And then here to the left you have a statue that's dedicated to the USS Monitor. Remember we were talking about that? That's a statue dedicated to the USS Monitor. Big naked guy. That's how you commemorate an ironclad warship. I don't know. I didn't design it. But this is McGorry Park. Really pretty little park. More quiet area of Greenpoint. Some of the Polish families and you know, people still live in this area because it's not as expensive as it is over closer to the subway. And here to the south you have the BQE, which was built by Robert Moses. You guys may recognize that name. One of the most powerful men to ever live in New York. He built just about everything in the city from like the 1930s to the 1970s. There's a great book on him called The Power Broker. It's humongous. Yeah, it's a ringing endorsement, I know, but they won the Pulitzer, so what do you need my recommendation for? But yeah, this is McGorry Park. Back to the tour. This is the main drag here of Greenpoint. A lot of little restaurants and shops. It's very quiet. You get like a little small town feel here because it is still kind of isolated compared to, let's say, Williamsburg, to just to the south, which has the L going through it. It's been developed a little more quickly, but it's been changed very quickly. It's been rezoned. For example, in 2005, Bloomberg rezoned like 170 blocks, over 170 blocks of Greenpoint and Williamsburg. And while this sounds pretty innocuous, what it does is it changes the ability of the land to be developed. And what they did was they turned a lot of it into high density residential, which allowed for these massive condos to be built. And this was done as the neighborhood was slowly starting to change because artists were moving in. It was becoming cool and interesting or whatever to some people. And so the developers come in and they capitalize on it, like, you know, to the 20th degree. And they basically change the neighborhood overnight. And it's very hard to, I guess, for a neighborhood to adapt quickly enough, and people get pushed out. It's a big issue. To learn more about that, why don't we go talk to my friend who's a Greenpoint native and knows a little bit about this. So what do you think are the biggest issues facing Greenpoint today?
So that's a very
That's a big question. I know. I'm sorry. There's a lot. It's going to be a short interview. I don't know what to.
But we're seeing a new wave of displacement and subsequent waves of displacement. And so what we want to fight for is not just for affordable housing, because the main question is always affordable for who. And a lot of these luxury giveaways, like you see behind us, are not actually creating affordability. They're increasing the prices for everyone around them.
These changes in the neighborhood aren't just natural changes. The city is actually pushing them along and accelerating them and giving subsidies while also not taking care of another population. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a big misconception that people have that this is just the natural order of the free market. It's actually built and very deliberate decision making by our legislators.
How did you decide to run for office?
Well, I'm not actually a politician. I decided to move back home to my hometown in Greenpoint and fight for what I could change, which is my own little piece of neighborhood. So City Council actually has 3 really important responsibilities. They pass legislation, they pass the New York City budget, and they also are in charge of land use policy, which is one of the most overlooked parts of their responsibilities.
Yeah, so find out your city council member, you freaks. It's the least you can do.
We are going to be a growing city. That's not something you can stop in any way, and we don't want to stop that. But it has to be responsible, and it has to deliver for the community, and there has to be a return on investment for what we're putting into these luxury developments.
Well, is there anything you want people to know about Greenpoint?
We're kind of a little bit of a backwater in terms of accessibility, but we're also a very tight-knit space. And we're neighbors who really care about each other. And that's been something that I grew up with here. And it's something that it constantly needs to be reinforced, but it's still here with us.
Beautifully said. I'm gonna go dry off my eyeballs. All right, back to it. Now that was interesting. Let's keep moving. Here to the right is the Greenpoint Savings Bank. So this building was built by Helmley and Huberty, a famous architectural firm. They were proteges of McKim, Mead and White. The bank was actually started in 1868, but the building was finished in 1906. Pretty Beaux-Arts building. If you guys remember Beaux-Arts, talked about that a million times. But you can see it looks, it's made to look like the Pantheon in Rome. All right, let's cross. Don't get hit by a car, Phil. Let's get on this side. But very quiet, very like, you know, compared for how close you are to Manhattan, it's pretty chilled out. Some other celebrities that are from the neighborhood, though, it's kind of cool story. Margaret Wise Brown. If you guys know who Margaret Wise Brown is, she was a children's book author. She authored over 100 books. She was like the contemporary of Dr. Seuss, if you guys know who he is. She made a very famous book called Goodnight Moon. Goodnight Moon. It's a cool little book. Where like a little rabbit says goodnight to everything in his room. But I recommend reading it to your kids if you have kids over there. I mean, even if your kids are all grown up, just call them up. They're in their 30s or something. Be like, hey, let me read you this. And they'll be like, whatever, Dad, can I get some money? How you doing, Phil? You doing okay?
I'm doing good.
Yeah? What do you think of Greenpoint? We hang out a lot in Greenpoint, huh? There's a lot of comedy and stuff in this neighborhood.
Great.
A lot of artists here in this neighborhood. All right, so we're walking down Manhattan. Still, here to the right, you can start seeing some cool stuff. You can see this clock here to the right. That clock was put in front of back in the mid-1800s, stores and store owners would have these clocks in front of their stores or their businesses to advertise. This was like the original advertising. People would be looking at your clock to see what time it was. This was before the iPhone. Yes, they actually existed. This moment existed in time where we didn't have these phones. How is that possible? But these used to be where people got their clocks, their time, and they'd look up and they'd see, oh, look at that jewelry store. This one fell into disrepair, and by the 1970s, it was, falling apart, and this guy volunteered to take it over, and they moved it here. And it's one of the only 4 of these clocks that are still located in New York City. And right next to it, you have Peter Pan Donuts, which is a very cool little neighborhood business that's been there for like 60 plus years. We should check it out, get some food there, huh? A maple donut. This place is so good. It's old school inside. It looks like it used to back in the 1960s. That's cheap still. Pretty great place. One of the like small businesses still left in the neighborhood. Oh boy. Well, let's keep on moving. Come on. Pretty good. Don't worry, I got Phil one. He's got his there. You got chocolate cake. It's a very aggressive choice, Phil. Another celebrity from the neighborhood, very famously, Mae West. Mae West was born in Greenpoint. She was a very famous entertainer and actress. She was famously arrested in the 1920s for her play, which was very scandalous because the play was called Sex. I'm sorry, the play was called Sex. She famously said in court, when they asked her, the judge asked her, "Are you trying to hold this court in contempt?" And she said, "On the contrary, Your Honor, I'm trying my hardest to conceal my contempt." We're walking by Norman right now. Now Norman is actually named for Dirk Volkertson. How cool of a name is Dirk Volkertson, by the way? That's obviously like a badass's name, Dirk. But Norman, because of Norseman, because of Norwegian, Norseman. All right. Let's cross. Come on, Phil, don't get hit. Now we've talked too a lot about how the makeup of the neighborhood has changed and things like that. But there used to be a very big Puerto Rican population there. They were more located up in the north end of Greenpoint. To learn more about that, let's stop at my friend's store here and talk a little more about that. So you're Puerto Rican, correct?
That's correct.
And how long have you owned Greenpoint Toys?
16 years.
Wow, 16 years. That's only 8 years less than I've been alive. He doesn't believe me. It's okay. And you used to be an NYPD officer, correct?
Right. I was a cop for 20 years. I came on in 86 and I left in 2006. I retired in 2006.
So you went from being a cop to selling toys.
It worked out where I did actually buy the store from the previous owner, and here I am.
What do you love most about Greenpoint?
It's the diversity. I do like the diversity about Greenpoint, and this is a place where you can still, at any given time, find anything you want.
So how has the neighborhood changed to you?
Well, when I first bought the toy store, the neighborhood was predominantly Polish, and over the years, I saw a change, younger families or the hipsters. So there was a big gentrification going on, and because of that, rents have went up, and kind of certain people got pushed out.
And how has that affected the Puerto Rican population in this area?
Ooh, I guess it did take a toll because of the high rents, and they were kind of forced out. But you still find some of them like locked in, like by Franklin Avenue.
So what's your favorite toy in the store?
Legos would be one of my favorite toys, and it's something a must-have in a store.
An NYPD officer who plays with Legos, huh?
That's right.
I don't have any problem with it. Well, it was a great meeting with you, officer. I think I'll take one of these.
Well, thanks for coming by, but you're going to have to pay for that.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, so the Puerto Ricans came to New York, started coming in the early 1900s. In 1917, the Jones Act was passed, allowing Puerto Ricans more freedom of travel between mainland United States and the island. And then in the 1950s, Commonwealth status was achieved, and more people even were being encouraged to move here. A lot of people were being encouraged for the manufacturing jobs and industry jobs that were located in places like Greenpoint and Williamsburg, so they moved there. The problem was that they didn't exist anymore. Industry had started leaving the city. So it had gone outside where land was cheaper, and a lot of these poor Puerto Ricans were basically in trouble. And so neighborhoods like Greenpoint suffered. And Greenpoint and Williamsburg were actually in big, big trouble because of that. Still eating this. Pretty good. Here on the right, we have Calexico. This is a pretty cool little restaurant, little burrito place. They started as a cart in Soho, got really popular. But my favorite Mexican place is over here on the left, Taqueria Norteña. I should stop in there and check out the Mexican population and see a little more about that, because those are the people who are coming in today. Let's check it out. Estoy aquí con mi amigo Guillermo, quien es el hijo del dueño de Taquería Norteña. ¿Qué tal?
Oh, ¿hablas español?
Sí, no es nada grande. ¿Y de qué parte de México sos?
Yo soy de Tlaxcala, el estado más pequeño de México.
Como el Rhode Island de México.
Como Rhode Island de México, así mismo.
¿Cómo has encontrado la comunidad aquí de mexicanos en Greenpoint?
Mexicano ha cambiado un poco más. Ha habido más hispanos antes y la área va cambiando año por año. Se ve más americano ya en esta área.
Entonces yo antes vivía en Greenpoint y de hecho yo venía a tu restaurante a cada rato, me encantaba. ¿Te acordás de mí?
Realmente no, han pasado muchas carras.
¿Y cuál es tu negocio favorito aquí en este vecindario?
Aquí me gusta mucho Cato's, Army and Navy. También la tienda de juguetes que está ahí, he ido varias veces. Son negocios pequeños y a veces es mejor apoyar a los negocios pequeños que ir a una compañía grande.
¿Y por qué tienen a un minion aquí, o minion, no sé cómo decirlo en español, pero por qué tienen uno de esos aquí en este salón?
Bueno, viene siendo parte de la vecindad. Antes vivía en el precinto del 94, lo encontró mi delibrista y lo trajo para acá para ser parte de la familia de la norteña.
Bueno, Guillermo, gracias por recibirnos aquí en tu restaurante. Huele rico ahí afuera, ya quiero comer, pero no tengo plata. ¿Está bien?
No hay problema, aquí todo hay solución.
So that was pretty sick. Keep moving. Here to the left you have Frankel's. This was actually started by these dudes from the Upper West Side, which isn't famous for its delis and its Jewish delis. And that's kind of what it's trying to recreate. Pretty good. Now we're walking more in the direction of Williamsburg. But like I was saying, Greenpoint's a little more isolated than Williamsburg, relatively speaking, which is why it hasn't been built up as quickly. It also isn't as attractive to the people with money because there's no train going into Manhattan from here. So now we're coming up to McGorry Park. This is built on landfill over the creek that used to divide Williamsburg and Greenpoint. And this is the creek that was filled in. There was a bridge built over it I was telling you, by Naziah Bliss. That's what actually helped this neighborhood to start getting developed. It was open in the early 1900s, the park was open, but then in 1936, the pool was open, McCarran Pool. It was one of 11 pools open that year under the New Deal, under FDR. It was the Great Depression, if you guys didn't know that. Nothing great about it, if you ask me. I don't know what this guy's doing. All right, let's cross, come on. Not get killed. And a really important neighborhood park here in Williamsburg and Greenpoint. We'll come in and check it out here. A lot of cool stuff to see. But it's nice and quiet day. You can see some of the high rises there. If you want to get over to my other side, Phil, you see some of the larger buildings that are being built in Williamsburg. We're talking about how it's been built up a little more quickly over there. And you can see some of the fancy hotels. That's the William Vale. Some other ones right around there as well. But it's kind of sad when you see a lot of these high rises on the water and things. It just makes it look like any town USA, and it destroys the street life there. When you basically have a gated community with thousands of people living in it, I mean, there's not going to be any street life there. People have all the amenities in their own building. They take up all the scenery, all the light gets blocked out, the view gets blocked out. It really has an effect on the neighborhood. And you kind of got to ask yourself, like, why are we doing this? You know, you market the neighborhood as this inclusive place where you can walk around with your kids and people say hi to each other in the street, but then you build something that completely destroys that. It doesn't make any sense. So you got to try to fight for what you really appreciate about a city, and first of all, you have to know what makes a city great, and that's part of what I'm trying my hardest to let people know. But once you know that, then you know what you're supposed to be protecting, and you don't just get caught up in the the frenzy of developing things or whatnot. So here behind, well, not behind me, in front of me, I guess, you have this is all McCarran Park. You also have another McCarran Park over there. Then you have the pool over there, and in this direction you have Williamsburg. And Greenpoint is famous for lots of different industrial things. I was talking about the USS Monitor, but it also is, it's actually still around there, is an ironworks called the Betty Mackey. I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly, but that's where they made the Iwo Jima statue, as well as the bronze bull. They've done lots of different things like that here. And today it has, still has some industry over on the east side of McGinnis, of Greenpoint. There's still warehouses and things like that, but a lot of it's gone away. Today they have like TV studios. You can actually shoot, they've shot shows like, what's that show? Girls, they've shot here. They shot Broad City here as well. They shot Billions. I actually did an episode of Billions here at the studios. Phil, look at that. Yeah. Yes, I guess kind of. It's not really mine to plug, but here's McCarran Park. We had quite a little adventure there, guys. This was kind of the end. Really cool little neighborhood. There's still the north end as well, the east. There's a lot to this neighborhood. I really enjoyed living here. It's very quiet, a lot of Polish people, a lot of Latin American people, but that's slowly starting to change. We have to remember that that's what makes a city interesting. That's what makes New York interesting. Once you sterilize, if it's all high rises, think about this city just became all high rises. It'd be a nightmare. This place would not be what it is today. Small businesses would be gone. You just got to know what you're trying to protect. Why do you come here? Why do you enjoy New York? And then figure that out, and then you protect that thing and make sure that thing sticks around. But here you have McCarran Park. We're coming to an end. Before we finish, I just wanted to say thank you for watching. Thank you for making it this far. Got to get that average duration time up. Whoa, analytics. Sorry. But please check out my Patreon. That really helps. I put on some extra stuff there as well. And you help me choose these videos. Like the video, subscribe, all that stuff. And yeah. I forget anything, Phil?
No, as far as I know.
As far as you know, no. Thank you, Phil. All right, well, I guess that's pretty much it. Check this out. You see it?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Thanks. All right, see you later.